Thank you very much, Rebecca. I'm just looking around. We've got our chief exec here, so we'll be all right. I don't have to say too much. That's lovely. All right. Rebecca, Richard, I think then, if that's okay, I'd like to start the meeting. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anita Day. I am Chair of Worcestershire Acute Hospital's NHS Trust. I'd like to welcome you to this year's annual general meeting. With us today, we have board members, obviously, but also some very important invited guests, a number of our system partners, Health Watch, Patient Participation Forum, the County Council's Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and of course members of staff. All of you are especially welcome. The main purpose of today is for us to look back on the year 2021 to 2022. During that year, as we all know, Sir David Nicholson was our chair. I'd like, on behalf of the board, to recognise and thank him for his invaluable contribution to the board and our trust over the 4 years that he was with us. Now, you will shortly be hearing from our Chief Executive, Matthew Hopkins, and our Chief Finance Officer, Neil Cook. I was hoping you would also be able to hear from our Chief Nursing Officer, Paula Gardner, but unfortunately she's off sick today, so get well soon, Paula. They will be sharing some of the highlights and challenges of the year that has just passed. They'll also look forward to what the future has in store for us. And then finally, I'll be throwing open the meeting for any questions you might have. As a trust, our purpose is very clear. It's set out in our strategic pyramid. It's about putting patients first. I really hope that everyone in this meeting and everyone watching our live stream on YouTube will recognise the incredible efforts that have been made by all our teams across all our hospitals to provide the best possible care for our patients, often in extremely challenging circumstances. None of our achievements in our annual report and our quality account would have been possible without our staff. And on behalf of the board, I'd like to say a massive thank you to them. Thank you for your unwavering commitment, compassion, and dedication to delivering the best services for local people, the best experience of care and outcomes for our patients. We could not do any of this without you. So thank you. Now, let me hand over to our Chief Executive, Matthew Hopkins. Matthew.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me nice and clearly. And just to echo Anita's introduction, to pay tribute to the staff of our organisation who continue to amaze me with their commitment to putting patients first. And Anita referred to the strategic pyramid. For us, our purpose as an organisation is to put patients first, and our direction, our North Star, if you like, is encapsulated in our vision statement, which is all to do with working in partnership with all of our colleagues. And I want to pay tribute to our partners at this point, because as Anita said, we as an organisation are not an island. We rely heavily on working closely with our GPs in the county, with the Hereford and Worcestershire Community Trust, and also with the County Council, particularly in relation to social care, but other activities such as the planning department, etc., for some of the big capital developments that we've had underway. So our ambulance service are obviously key partners, but so are our patients as well. And our ambition, building on the work that we've done in 2021-22 in future years, to make sure that the voice of our patients is heard loud and clear in the way in which we run our organisation and improve services for them. Our vision statement also talks to delivering the best healthcare for the communities that we serve, and also the importance of leading and supporting our staff. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the review of the last year, which of course was up to the 31st of March. So it's often 6 months later, a little bit difficult to kind of look back on that period, because time moves on very quickly and things change very rapidly. But I just want to remind everybody that during that year we were all wearing masks everywhere. We were wearing masks in our hospitals, in our those cinemas that were open, in our shopping centres, in our supermarkets. We, in our hospitals, were testing people coming in for operations, coming in through A&E. We were testing our staff regularly, twice a week on the lateral flow tests. We had designated over 100 beds across the 2 hospital sites for people sick with COVID. It's easy to think now, of course, with perhaps some sort of normality returning, but during this particular year, our staff and all of us, in fact, were really being affected by the 3rd and 4th wave of the COVID pandemic, and it's important just to have that context in one's mind. Because it's, I think, easy, as I said earlier, the things that are troubling us now, cost of living crisis and interest rates and so on, which are equally challenging, but perhaps weren't such an issue for this particular annual report. So if I can take us to the next slide. I think it's fair to say that many of our services during this particular period were getting back up and running after the previous year's lockdown and a cessation of planned services, particularly outpatients and operations. And as you can see there, quite large numbers of patients being treated with emergency operations. We supported mums giving birth to over 5,000 babies during the year, and we also I always love these numbers, 878,000 sheets laundered. That's a significant number, and of course recognising that some of the companies that support us in that are key partners, and they are facing their own challenges at the moment, particularly with energy costs. So a busy year, and a busy year, next slide please, characterised, as I said, by COVID. We looked after over 2,000 inpatients during that period of time. We discharged 1,700, so we've been highly successful during the pandemic and during this particular year in question in helping people recover from their illnesses associated with the virus. And we know again that we still have people that are being infected and being quite unwell as we sit here and speak here this afternoon. Vaccination was a major part of this particular period as well, and our vaccination hub, as well as the working with partners across the county, delivered significant numbers of both COVID booster injections, but also flu vaccinations. And I've got a couple of arms with puncture holes after yesterday having this year's autumn booster and flu vaccination. I'd encourage everybody on the call, if you haven't already had your flu and COVID boosters, please do so. For those that are eligible, always take that opportunity. And 9 million non-sterile gloves. That's a number to remember, isn't it? During the year. So a significant operation, making sure that our staff were equipped, our patients were kept safe, our staff were kept safe, and we were able to continue to run the organisation. So a big thank you also to my executive team and to board members for the unerring focus on patient safety and staff safety and welfare during this period. Next slide, please. So alongside responding to the pandemic and responding to the restarting of elective services and supporting in many areas quite exhausted staff that had for their 12-hour shifts been clothed in full personal protective equipment, not easy delivering care in those circumstances, and also themselves perhaps being exposed out of work to illnesses. We achieved a number of significant changes during this particular period. In order to shorten waiting times that had grown during the pandemic as a consequence of the national a direction to cease and redeploy staff, cease elective work and redeploy staff into supporting the pandemic response. We have seen our waiting list for both diagnostic tests and for operations and things such as endoscopies grow, and we've worked very closely with our colleagues at the Midlands region of the NHS and with our integrated care system partners to ensure that we're able to secure capital monies to increase our diagnostic facilities across our sites. And during this period, we've installed mobile as well as fixed endoscopy, ultrasound, MR, and CT scanning capacity, which is helping us every day at the moment to close the gap between the requirement for routine diagnostic tests at 6 weeks and for those services that the waiting list have grown during that period of time. We also have talked, I think, at the annual general meeting, Chair, before about the well-recognised challenge of the Worcestershire Royal A&E department being only built for 45 to 50,000 attenders, or certainly 40 to 50 patients capacity at any one time, and the fact that very often we have over 100 patients receiving care in the facility. Colleagues will know that we sought some additional capital monies to rebuild the Worcestershire Royal A&E department, and that work started during this particular financial year and continues with a springtime opening on the horizon. And for those of you who have been on the Worcestershire Royal site, you would have seen cranes and building activity, quite significant building activity during this period of time. Just referring back to the staff well-being and the real sense of moral injury that many of our staff have experienced during the caring for people during the pandemic, not being able to seek the support of relatives because we were looking to protect people from keeping them out of hospital. The moral injury that our staff experienced during this period of time has been really quite significant, and our teams have worked extremely hard to ensure that our staff are well supported with a strong health and well-being package. And we've recently added into that financial and welfare support in making sure that our staff feel well supported within the organisation. So a big thanks to everybody that's been involved in that endeavour. We continue to work with our local maternity and neonatal system and with the national maternity and midwifery leaders to continue the improvement work in our maternity services on the Worcestershire Royal site. And there was significant activity during this particular period in making sure that our staff felt listened to and involved in service developments and service changes, and that work continues in response particularly to the two Dame Ockenden reports that have been recently published, and ensuring that we're able to provide safest possible births for the mums and families of the county. We also saw during this period some real focus on patients and patient experience, and for those that are not familiar with the #CallMe campaign, this is an approach that was the brainchild of one of our consultant anaesthetists, Mike McCabe, who after an encounter with a child pre-op in actually inadvertently calling the child by their deceased name, the name that they no longer were known by, raised for him a question of how do we ensure that people who like to be known by a different name are referred to properly by the name that they like to be called. And we've seen 80,000 patients since that initiation of that programme of work at the beginning of 2021, having the opportunity to ensure that they are being called properly by the name that they're known by. And the data that we have suggests that 32% of every single patient that we treat likes to be called a different name to the name that is held, if you like, on their NHS records and their birth certificate. For Black and Asian minority staff, patients, that rises to 50 to 60%, and quite significant. You know, our name is I think the quote says, the sweetest sound we'll hear when our name is called, but imagine being called by the wrong name day in, day out when you're in hospital. So our #CallMe campaign continues within our organisation, but also across the integrated care system in Hereford and Worcestershire and further afield. I learned yesterday that Birmingham Women's and Children's Hospital Board received a recommendation and approved it to take the same approach in their hospitals for their children and their patients, to ensure that their name bands, wristband and labels all contain the #CallMe name, as well as the name that is officially on the patient. So that's a great initiative born within the walls of our organisation that now is being rolled out across the NHS, something we should all be proud of. We also saw finally the approval of our surgically assisted, robot-assisted surgery business case, and the robot is actually in the building here at the Alex, where I am, and we're now in the process of commissioning that and ensuring that the consultants and other staff that will be supporting the operations on predominantly men with prostate cancer are properly trained and ready to go later this year. The reason why this is a particular notable achievement during this period is that this has been an initiative that the organisation has been working on for many years, with the support of Ian Dukes and other campaigners and fundraisers locally in the county, and it is absolutely great to see that finally being developed for our patients locally, rather than having to go out of the county for this, the robot-assisted surgery on prostate cancer. And then the final one on to note on here is the digital innovation. As we continue to see our services increasingly being supported by technology and the use of computers, we have made a major step in developing our electronic patient record and rolling that out across this particular financial year, with the upgrade to our patient administration system during the financial year, which was executed smoothly and led and paved the way for now our electronic patient record, which is being implemented this year and next year, with again the support of additional funding specifically for electronic patient records that's been provided by the government. I should take this opportunity to pay thanks to our local MPs, who have been alongside us all the way in helping to secure capital funding into all three of our hospitals, Kidderminster, Alex and the Worcester site, to increase capacity and to improve the services that we're able to provide, and we're excited to see some of these initiatives coming on stream now. Next slide, please. So in the context of the pandemic, you'll see that there's a sort of a curate's egg of kind of good in parts performance during this particular year, but on the whole quite a disappointing picture, which I think is partly the context of COVID, but also partly the context of the increasing demand that we've seen. We've seen a growth in our 18 weeks and diagnostic waiting times, as we referenced, and our 4-hour emergency access standard performance, whilst benchmarking relatively average across the Midlands, we have obviously seen quite a distance away from the target of 95%, which we understand the government is going to retain. But of course, we saw during this period, particularly the autumn, starting in September of 21, an increase again in ambulance handover delays, which remains our top quality and safety priority as an organisation, and we're trying to make sure that is recognised across the whole of the county as a priority for us all to work together to address. And likewise, cancer waiting times continues to be a particular priority area for us in our recovery of services. Next slide, please. A number of the indicators here are in better shape on this slide. Our mortality rates are within the expected range. Our VTE assessment again remains, I think, a stable picture, but also hospital-acquired infections for us remain a particular challenge, particularly the Clostridium difficile infection, which remains a priority for us to address. And next slide, please. Then in terms of our people and culture indicators, appraisal and mandatory training compliance in reasonable shape, but it's notable that the turnover rate during this particular year started to rise, and we have benchmarked that against other trusts, and we're finding that that is a similar picture in many acute trust organisations. It's not something that we are complacent about, because we know we need to focus on retaining our staff and making sure they feel supported and trained. But of course, the risks around pensions and the changes to pensions also starting to see an increase in the number of our staff that are taking their retirement opportunities perhaps sometimes earlier than they might have done ordinarily. So this is a further area for us to continue to focus on during this year and into future years. Next slide, please. And then moving on, obviously I'm not Paula, but I thought I'd take the opportunity to talk to the quality account, which is, we've touched on already some elements of that. Next slide, please. We have three key areas of our quality strategy during this particular year to focus on: care that is safe, care that's clinically effective, and also care that's a positive experience for our patients and carers. And you see there the bottom right hand side of the slide talks to participation in clinical research as part of our clinically effective work. And we, whilst these numbers may not necessarily mean very much to everybody, our participation in clinical research, particularly you can see there the infection element, was really quite significant, where we signed up many patients into the national COVID research trials, and were recognised as an organisation that has really taken strides forward in our clinical research arena, and having recently approved our research strategy, that's going to continue to grow from strength to strength across our hospitals. You'll also see there some photos where we have launched some information leaflets and web-enabled support. We have worked closely with our charity on providing extra support to our patients. You can see they're making sure holding water bottles to ensure our oncology patients keep themselves well hydrated, and also making sure that we continue the rollout of our #CallMe initiative. So a number of priorities that have been focused on in the bottom left hand there, quality priorities around reducing medicine incidents where patients are administered the wrong dose. We've also had a real focus on nutrition, because that's an area that we knew we needed to improve, and we've also had quite a significant focus on falls and falls reduction within our hospitals, particularly those patients that are at risk of falling, making sure that risk assessments and call bells and other things called rumble mats are available to ensure that we can avoid harm in our hospitals as a consequence of falls. So a lot of activity during this period to make sure that our patients are safe and well cared for in our hospitals. Next slide, please. And then in terms of the continuing work alongside the Care Quality Commission as our quality of care regulator, again, as a consequence of the pandemic, the CQC limited their inspection activities, but they still worked alongside us to ensure that they were cognizant of the improvements that we were focusing on, and particularly notable in May 2021, where they removed the Section 31 conditions that they placed on the organisation about a year prior, was December 2019, which were related to care of patients within our emergency departments. And we then had a series of engagement events where we invited CQC colleagues onto our sites, not for an inspection, but more of a meet and greet of our staff and our patients, and to see the continuing improvement work that's been focused on. We had 3 engagement events during the year, which we will continue to commit to support the CQC doing similar engagement events during the course of this year as well. And I think the benefit there is, whilst they weren't able to necessarily do their normal inspection approach, it made sure that the dialogue was kept open and they understood what we were focusing on and how we were continuing the journey of improvement. Because, of course, we focus on improvement not to please the CQC, but actually because it's the right thing to do for our patients. And that's the culture of continuous improvement that we're seeking to continue to implement within our organisation. Next slide, please. And in terms of then looking forward into this year, of course, which we're half the year through already, you can see here our priorities, which have been set out in our quality and patient safety strategy under those 3 headings of care that is safe, clinically effective and positive experience. The real broad focus on a range of key priorities that have been informed by our patients. So we sought to understand from our patients and from our staff the areas they were most concerned with. And you can see there some of the elements around, again, infection control, around discharge planning, around food and hydration, around sepsis management, and also continuing to focus on the long waiting patients in elective recovery and diagnostic recovery. The other key initiative that we will continue to roll out is the focusing on patients with learning disabilities and making sure that our services are meeting the broadest range of needs of all of our patient groups where we can. So those are our priorities for this year, and we'll be no doubt reporting on good progress on those at next year's annual general meeting. Next slide, please. So I think that's it for me, Chair. I'll hand it back to you. I think in summary, I would say that we've achieved a lot, but we have some continuing wicked issues as a hospital and a health and care system that are particularly with regard to urgent and emergency care. And as I said earlier, that continues to be our #1 quality improvement priority, in order that patients get the best possible experience. But of course we rely on all of our partners in order to make sure that we can make sustainable progress with regard to emergency care, whilst we continue to work with our staff on the elective recovery, cancer improvement and financial management, which of course we're coming to on the next set of slides as part of the annual general meeting. So I'll hand it back to you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you for that comprehensive summary. In the interest of time, what I'll suggest is that any questions that anyone has on the information you've shared, that we'll take those at the end. So I'd like to move on, if I may, to Neil, our Chief Finance Officer, and ask him if he would like to take us through the annual accounts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Matthew. Next slide, please. So we have 4 financial duties. The first one being to achieve in-year income and expenditure control total, or to remain within it. Sadly, we didn't achieve that, but I'll come on to explain why. Income and expenditure break even taking 1 year with another, which is normally over 3 years, but in our case it's over 5 years. And again, we've not been able to achieve that, but I will come on to explain why. To remain within our capital resourcing limits, so the amount that we've been allotted to spend on capital, we have remained within that, and to remain within our external financing limits, which is effectively a cash control, and again, we've remained within our cash control total, so we've achieved that one. So in terms of the in-year break-even position, we reported an overspend against plan of £1.4 million, and just to put that into context, in an extremely challenging year, as Matthew has already outlined, that equated to just 0.2% of our overall spend. It indeed was £600,000 better than we had forecast earlier in the year. So we actually ended the year stronger than we had sort of forecast halfway through the year, but unfortunately still wasn't able to get over the line in terms of achieving that. We also made efficiency savings, again in a very challenging environment during COVID, of 0.9% of turnover. Significant proportion of those, 5.2 million, were recurrent. As Matthew's outlined, we've made some significant investment in capital, £51.5 million in the year. Much of that was externally funded from the Department of Health and based on some business cases that we'd submitted earlier in the year. And we ended the year with a cash balance of £59.2 million, which sounds significant, but was very much in line with our plan, very much on the basis of sizable cash balances and advances to support us over the COVID period, and timing differences over the end of the financial year and paying some of those high-cost capital invoices, settling those invoices. Could we move on to the next slide, please? So you may not be able to see the graphs on the right, and I'll come on to those in a second, but you can see over the course of the last 3 years, quite a significant movement there in our bottom line performance. And you'll be aware from last year's AGM, we were significantly funded throughout the COVID period to ensure that the NHS wasn't short of cash and resources to support the pandemic. Hence, you can see on the top line there, our income and expenditure indeed moved quite significantly between 2020, 2021 and 21-22. And the financial regime going forward will be to try and wean us back off some of that additional non-recurrent COVID expenditure that we've been using over the past year or two. In terms of the pie charts to the right, so on the right, as you'd expect, a significant proportion of our expenditure comes from our commissioners, Herefordshire and Worcestershire CCGs, as they were known at the time, 470.5 million. Significant proportion too in respect of the super-regional services from NHS England specialist services, £89.5 million. And then there's a few other smaller components, but one worth pointing out really is education and training, which is particularly important, £13.4 million. In terms of our expenditure, as you'd very much expect, it's very much heavily invested in the workforce, £357.5 million, followed by drugs, 53.2, supplies and services, both clinical and non-clinical together, £77.2 million. Clinical negligence premiums, 16.8, something that we're always targeting to try and reduce, of course. And the other two large components that is worthy of note there, a significant challenge for the organisation is in respect of our finance charges, and the PFI in particular, which historically has been a significant challenge at the high value, high cost of our PFI contract. And together they total about £40 million with the financing and interest and the PFI charges. Next slide, please. So the auditors audited our accounts for 21-22. It was found to be a true and fair view of the financial position. The accounts were prepared properly in line with accounting standards and the Department of Health and Social Care manual. There was a qualified element to the opinion and the limitation of scope for this opinion, and that related back to March 2020 during the height of the COVID period, where the auditors couldn't actually verify on the date we were recording stocks at the end of the financial year. That's not unfamiliar. I think most, if not all, NHS organisations would have had that challenge at that point. Because we're in a comparable accounting period, we take comparable period 1 year with the next, it remains a qualified limited scope opinion. In terms of our value for money opinion, 3 criteria, 3 areas of focus: financial sustainability, governance, and improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness. The auditors identified risks in all 3, 2 of the 3, risk identified because of the Trust's significant deficit in respect of our financial sustainability. And the findings still found that we have some significant challenges in respect of our underlying financial challenge. So we're still forecasting a deficit. We have a large cumulative deficit, and as such, the auditors found that we've still got significant weakness in that area. The risk assessment in respect of our governance, the auditors believe that there'd be no risk of significant weaknesses would be identified, and indeed that is what they have found, but they have identified some areas that we could maybe improve that we have taken on board. And in terms of improving economy efficiency and effectiveness, the auditors did find that we have made some progress in those areas, but again, still significant weaknesses have been identified. And that we haven't made sufficient impact to consider these closed. So good progress, but more to do, and therefore the auditors weren't going to close that. So that is a finding on the value for money opinion. Next slide, please. And then just looking forward to 22-23, the period that we're now in, of course, continues to work alongside our partners. We've got a new integrated care board, and we will work with our system partners on how to maximise value for patients and ensure the best use of resources for the population we serve. This year we will have a continuation of the fixed price contracts that we've had over the course of last year under the COVID regime. There are some variable elements in terms of incentivising performance, particularly in respect of reducing elective waiting times. As Matthew's outlined, the economic backdrop at the minute, high inflation, we have got rising demand for our services, scarcity of trained doctors and nurses will be those particular challenges that would impact our financial position in this year. However, we will be working towards addressing all of those in our historic financial challenges through better use of resources and through our new forward improvement system. So we'll continue to invest significant capital resources to improve our estate facilities, and obviously the state-of-the-art equipment that Matthew mentioned, particularly the robot, in improving our patient experience. I think that's it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neil. And by the way, I noticed that your opening slide described you as interim Chief Finance Officer. In fact, that's an update, and Neil is our substantive full CFO. In fact, in terms of the finances, just to confirm that the annual report, the accounts, and the audit certificates are on our website, alongside, in fact, the minutes of the last AGM, and indeed the declarations of interest. All of that is freely available. All right, moving on then, I'd like to hand back to Matthew to talk about the future and looking forward.
Okay, thanks, Chair, and I guess it's building on much of what I've talked about in the kind of review of the year. I just want to again just pause a moment just to draw out some key things from our strategic vision and our strategic plan, which is encapsulated in this pyramid diagram, and to confirm again that really even after 2.5 or so years of an unprecedented global pandemic, our purpose as an organisation and our vision for the future, I think, has stood the test of time and continues to be the things that we're really focused on, which is our partnership working in the context of the new Integrated Care Board and the national NHS focus on integration and working more closely with general practice and community and social care and our patients, and really focusing on making sure that we're delivering the best healthcare possible within the resources that we have for the communities that we serve, and really driving a focus on ensuring that we're meeting the different demographic makeup of the communities across the county and further afield, where we provide services into other parts of the West Midlands. Clearly, that focus on leading and supporting our staff and our teams to be the best that they can be continues to be an absolute priority for us going forward. We recognise we strongly believe there are 4 key aims and objectives that we need to get right. We need to make sure our services are organised in the best possible way across our 3 main hospital sites, but also recognising that we have provided services from other sites such as the Evesham Hospital, such as Tenbury Hospital, and making sure that in the context of working closely with our partners in Hereford and Worcestershire Health and Care Trust, that we make sure that we're providing the services that people need in support of the community hospital strategy that I know that they are seeking to develop. Best experience and care and outcomes for patients is crucial. We want to continue to reduce the risk of avoidable harm in our hospitals, whilst recognising that the experience of care, that sense of being cared for by compassionate, kind staff that are trained and equipped and supported and empowered to do the best that they can do, is a crucial part of our focus again in the coming year. Best use of resources is another strategic priority for us. Is really all about making sure that not just the money, the Worcestershire pound that we get to deliver health and care within the county, but also our buildings are used effectively, that we make sure that we continue to invest in the Kidderminster Hospital site, which is our ambulatory diagnostic and short stay day case treatment centre, that the Alex site in Redditch becomes a centre of excellence for planned surgery, building on the success of our breast services centralisation there on the Alex site, but also supporting those patients that use our emergency department there and increasing the diagnostic facilities. We want to eradicate this view that the Alex is somehow having services stripped from it. It just isn't true. We will continue to invest in the Alex as a shining star in the Worcestershire Acute, a constellation of services that really meet the needs of not only the local people in Bromsgrove and Redditch, but also across the county that need planned surgery. And then, of course, the Worcestershire Royal site is our major acute hospital, where we see our sickest patients, those with heart attacks, those with strokes, those with multiple trauma, as well as making sure that our inpatient paediatrics and maternity services continue to go from strength to strength, and that we continue to address this issue, long-standing issue that I touched on previously in relation to ambulance delays, which we are starting to see some green shoots of progress since we've implemented the Your Next Patient approach, which we've copied from the North Bristol Trust. So we're learning from examples of good practice elsewhere. Our forward behaviours and our forward culture programme continues to be a centrepiece, and as it is in our pyramid, a centrepiece for the way in which we go about our work, the way we behave towards each other, the way we work together, and ensure that we are leading and listening appropriately is going to continue to be a priority for us. The clinical services strategy, I think, has also stood the test of time, and we want to continue that engagement with our GPs, particularly through the primary care networks and the district collaboratives, but also with our consultant body and our clinical teams to ensure that we're organising our services in the best way possible, and that they are clinically sustainable. And to do that, we need to ensure that our digital strategy, I talked about our electronic patient record, that we deliver on that, because that will deliver safer care for our patients and more efficient care. We need our quality and patient safety plan across the next 3 years to be fully implemented, and the things that I've already talked about earlier in the meeting in relation to our priorities for safe and effective care. And also our estate strategy, making sure that we're using our buildings in the most effective way. And then underpinning all of this is our improvement system, our management system for how we go about empowering our staff to not only come in to do their jobs and to do their work, but also equipping them to improve the way in which they work along the way. And that's encapsulated in our forward improvement system. And just this week, we're embarking on our first major scale workshop across a full week, focusing on our recruitment processes to ensure that they are as slick and swift and streamless as possible, so that we can fill our vacancies with high caliber staff in the shortest period of time, giving our staff the best experience. So our pyramid has, I think, stood the test of time through COVID and continues to be, if you like, the arrowhead for the way in which we'll be taking our organisation forward over the next few years. Next slide, please. So let's get to some specifics. These are our priorities as we speak. I talked about elective recovery. We are now focusing on the national NHS target. It's been agreed with government to have nobody waiting over 78 weeks for an appointment or an operation, which adds up to 18 months, which is still a very long time, by the end of March. And we continue to focus on ensuring that is our one of our key priorities. We suspect the year after that will reduce down to 52 weeks, but we're gearing ourselves up to make sure that we're in a good place with those extra capacity and extra facilities that I talked about. I talked about the importance of our emergency pathway. We are anticipating we'll be moving into the first floor of the new emergency village in the Aikenbury building during November, with a view to then the full A&E, replacement A&E department being open in the springtime of next year. And we are all very excited about that, because we think that will contribute significantly, not completely, it's not the panacea for all the challenges on the urgent and emergency care pathway, but it will create an environment for our emergency teams and our acute physicians and acute medical teams to have more space to meet the growing demand of patients that we're seeing. Other major capital investments, we've also talked about robotic surgery. We continue with our plans and building the business case to re-provide the operating theatres on the Alex site, in order that we can really describe a state-of-the-art planned surgery facility there, which is extremely exciting. In response, obviously, to the focus from NHS England on integrated working, so working more closely with our partners, we will continue that partnership working that's encapsulated in our vision statement, and we'll work and continue to work across the integrated care system. We'll work with our partners in Warwickshire on their work on improvement and sharing our learning from our forward improvement system. And we work very closely in a number of clinical service networks already, particularly the development of the South Midlands Pathology Network. And I was just before this meeting with the pathology team, just understanding and learning from them some of their achievements, but also some of their challenges coming forward. We're about to just refresh our forward behaviours, just to make sure that they continue to be fit for purpose, but to also focus on compassion and civility in our work, which sadly across society we are seeing perhaps behaviours that not everybody would be proud of. And some of that spills into our hospitals. We want to ensure that our staff are able to respond appropriately to situations that are challenging, but also making sure that working closely with each other we build compassion and civility into our work at every opportunity. I talked about our forward improvement system being the way in which we do our improvement work, and then last but certainly not least, the digital innovation that we have being rolled out this year with the start of our electronic patient record, which, as I said, will create a much safer and more efficient environment for delivering care within our hospitals. So some really, really good, important things, exciting things for us to continue to focus on. But clearly, elective recovery, cancer treatment, and emergency care are our three priorities, alongside making sure we use our finances most effectively. Next slide, please. And I think that's about it. I think, Chair, what I would say is, again, none of this is going to be possible without our wonderful staff. And I want to, before I finish and hand back to you, Chair, to pay tribute once again to the fantastic staff that work within our hospitals. And whilst we might not always get it right, I am so proud of the passion and the commitment of our staff, and this is many of our staff in the Alex ED, who go above and beyond and have done through the pandemic every single day of the week, and I pay tribute to them in handing it all back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Matthew, and absolutely, I think we can't thank our staff often enough. As I promised at the beginning, I would like now to invite questions from the gallery. Just while we're waiting for Pete for that, I just wondered, Rebecca, can I ask, have we had any questions submitted in advance?
Richard, if we've had anything that we've received at this point?
Chair, we've had a number covering shared themes, which have already been addressed in part by Matthew, around the issues, the continuing challenge in urgent and emergency care, particularly in the work that we're doing to reduce ambulance handovers, reduce waits in ED, and improve patient flow through our hospitals and indeed through the wider system, and the elective recovery piece that Matthew's already referred to in terms of our recovery to start bringing down waiting lists post-COVID, given the increases that we've seen in recent times. I know both those, I can see Councillor Clayton's also got his hand up, I know both of those issues have also been discussed in a number of other forums, including the Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee, but I don't know whether Matthew wants to add anything to what he's already said on either of those two things.
Thanks, Richard. I don't think so. I mean, we end up going into levels of detail that perhaps not appropriate, but happy to respond to any of Councillor Clayton's intelligent questions. I'm sure he's got written down on his sheet there in front of him, as usual.
So thank you then. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Matthew. Councillor Clayton, over to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I thought the meeting was quite good and quite informative, and I'm glad that you and both Matthew mentioned the staff, because you're right, it has been a trying time for all of us actually to go through COVID and a number of other things. But I have three questions, if you don't mind. Well, two questions and a comment. Matthew mentioned about the new A&E department, and to me that's a bit of exciting news, because that could solve some issues which are there, which is already mentioned. So I'm quite looking forward to that, and I've no doubt I'd like to come along to see it. The other thing, Neil mentioned about the capital programme, and one of the things which a number of my residents who actually live in Redditch, one of their main issues is the car park, and I just wondered if there's any capital programme going towards a multi-storey car park or something else, because I know land is scarce around the hospital site. That was my first question.
Matthew, do you want to start? Do you want to take that one, or ask someone else to respond?
I'm very happy to, and I think one of the key things that we've recognised is that as our 3 hospital sites have got busier, it's put a particular pressure on car parking, and during the COVID period, that wasn't so visible, but it's certainly becoming more and more visible now, particularly on the Kidderminster site. But I think the same applies to all 3 sites. So one of the things that we've lacked, I think, as a trust is a really clear strategy for car parking and the way in which we organise ourselves to make sure that patients and visitors and staff can park successfully. So what we've decided to do, and this is going to take a little bit of time, but we're going to look for a partner or organisation that essentially their business is running car parks, as opposed to us people that run hospitals trying to run car parks as well. To see if we can get some interest in them bringing in some investment in order then to have the return on investment by taking the revenues in a way that any car park provider does. And clearly we'll have some stipulations there in terms of the importance of the provision being legal, the provision being accessible to all parts of the community, particularly people living with disabilities, and making sure that we have the right balance of staff car parking, visitor car parking, to make it a much better experience. Because the thing I'm always conscious of is when you come for an appointment or for an operation, the first impression of any hospital is the car park experience, and that's even before you get into the reception. And hopefully meet some nice smiley faces in reception. But in big hospitals, you're then having to encounter, find your way around. And what we're very conscious of is the car parking experience is not good at the moment. We will be looking at kind of options around multi-storey, or actual new build multi-storey, or the kind of extra level car parking options in order to make best use of the available space. Your specific question about land usage and land availability on the Alex site, I mean, we are, as you'll know, required by the NHS to report any surplus to use land. And
sorry, Matthew, I was on about the Worcester Roll site,
okay.
About the parking.
Yeah, I mean, so we've secured an extra, I think we opened an extra 250 spaces, I think, last April last year, and as I said, I think we will be looking at a wide range of options, because we do know that we've got quite a compressed resource of car parking on the Worcester side. I think the other thing to note is that I think we will need to look at the road access as well. As we increase car park space numbers, we need to make sure that we've got road access right as well. So that's something I think that will come alongside a new plan for car parking which is being developed. So we need to keep close on that, Brandon, so that you're briefed and you're fully aware, because I know that's something that is a concern for our patients and the residents of the county.
Thank you.
It is. And my second question is Matthew, you talked about in your report regarding maternity, and I just wondered about, you talked about different services going into different hospitals and things like that, you said spreading them around, and around being more elective surgery and the wonderful things you're talking about, robotics and everything else which is going there, and the new theatres. I just wondered about the maternity, because one of the issues obviously is with Redditch, because maternity is all in one part of the county at the moment, and with the travelling of the mothers basically to the Royal, therefore I think it creates even more pressure. And I just wondered if some maternity services, not all, some maternity services would come back to Redditch to alleviate the problem with the Royal.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I know that's a talking point at the moment. I mean, I think the reality is that beyond the provision that we that we currently have on the Alex site, which is predominantly antenatal and scanning facilities, and also at Princess of Wales Hospital in Bromsgrove, the likelihood of inpatient maternity services returning to the Alex is 0. And the reason for that is because we've got a successful inpatient maternity service at Worcester Royal. And the second reason is that there is a national shortage of both midwives and a national shortage of kind of middle grade doctors, so the kind of doctors in training level that you need to provide a safe service. And splitting the service across 2 sites, you would need to double the workforce, because you'd need the same number of staff for rotas on both sites. And the prospect of that ever being possible, I think, is 0. I think the third reason that it's not going to happen is because of resources beyond staff, money. When you've got a successful maternity service that is already running and serving people of the county, why would you dilute that in order to split it across 2 sites? It just doesn't have a logical or a clinical case for change. And I think that's important for people to understand. Even if money grew on trees, Brandon, the likelihood of ever being able to do this, I think, is 0. The other thing I would say, which is perhaps a more positive aspect on this, is that in Worcestershire, mums to be, and particularly those from deprived communities, are actually getting a gold service provision, or 26% of them are getting a gold service provision, which is called the Maternity Continuity of Care model. And we've successfully rolled out that model during 2019 and 2020, which basically means that mums and families will see the same team, small team, 6 midwives, and those midwives will work and follow them through from early pregnancy through to late pregnancy. Somebody from within that small team will then be in the hospital delivering their baby with them, and then following up on the postnatal care. Now, other parts of the West Midlands, that model isn't in place. It is recognised and is in fact the model that is used in some other developing Western countries, and that is the model that is the preferred approach within the NHS in England. And as I said, mums and families already are across the county, 26% are served by that model. Our ambition is to increase that when we have the requisite number of midwives, and I think that will really encapsulate a much better experience for mums and families than us being distracted by a conversation about inpatient maternity services returning to the Alex. I'd like us to focus on how we make sure that we can start to continue the rollout of maternity continuity of care where it's safe to do so. And I'd rather we had conversations about that with our local community than necessarily something that just is not going to happen because of resourcing and financing constraints. So that's where I think our board is in relation to particular maternity continuity care. So hopefully that's a fulsome answer to your question.
It certainly was. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's the end of my questions.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other questions from anyone else on the gallery? Dr. Smart.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question for our Finance Director, please. First of all, congratulations on being made substantive Financial Director. I was really interested in your slide about the auditors, and it said under governance that they had made 6 improvement suggestions, and I just wondered if they would help us in improving our balance of our books, so to speak.
Thank you. Thank you, Rosemary. They weren't significant recommendations. that there were. Our view was around, our board assurance framework and what we've done over the last 12 months to improve our governance arrangement was very strong. I think some of the recommendations that are made, I think we would perhaps have potentially disagreed with, but we've accepted and moved on, given that those aren't significant recommendations, but they're not in the main about making significant improvements in respect of financial position. This is more about you could look at some of the areas to improve governance. It's not there's nothing of huge significance now.
In a way, I suppose that's reassuring to you that they can't bring up any bright ideas to help us.
No, audit are there to verify the accounts, not provide the advice on where to go, but challenge you in respect of doing more and doing better and doing it faster. But no, not specifically in respect of consultancy, providing this is the area that you might find some savings in. No, we're aware of where we compare with others, and as I said in the finance report, we have some huge challenges in respect of our PFI estate, that being one of our significant challenges. But we're working in the right areas, and certainly, as Matthew mentioned, on the recruitment, we've got our first value stream coming out this week in respect of improving the time that it takes to hire and the process around our recruitment. So hopefully, we are focused in the right areas. It is a huge challenge, of course. But we're aware of where some of that opportunity certainly is, yeah, Rosemary.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I can't see anything else.
Sorry, Chair, I understand from Richard that there was a question on YouTube. Richard, is that right? Or have I just dreamt that you sent me a message about that?
No, Matthew, you haven't dreamed it. This is something that's happened while the meeting's been live streamed, that we've been asked a question by somebody watching the feed about the return date of the Garden Suite ambulatory chemotherapy service to the Alex.
Would you like to take
that
one?
I'll perhaps happily take that as well. So just to a quick recap, in the first wave of COVID, we designated the Kidderminster site as our kind of COVID-free hospital. And we moved the ambulatory chemotherapy unit from the Alex temporarily to the Kidderminster site, where we spent a good amount of money in creating a nice fit-for-purpose facility in A block at Kidderminster, which is one of the older buildings there. Our intention was always to review that temporary decision after the main kind of period of COVID pandemic, which we did, and concluded that the right thing to do would be to return the Garden Suite ambulatory chemotherapy suite to the Alex site. It then ensued the question of where best to house the facility, particularly given that we had a number of moving parts on the Alex site in relation to the plans for the Alex operating theatre refurbishment and reprovision, but also the expansion of endoscopy facilities as part of the diagnostic expansion that I talked about earlier. So I think the space has been identified where the Alex Garden Suite will return to, but we need to make a number of moves of services before that is possible, in order that we can safely provide the facilities without building works disruption to our patients. So at the moment we are working on a firm plan for the beginning of 2024, being when the Garden Suite will return. It's worth noting that in the meantime, the A block that the Garden Suite is currently housing in the Kidderminster site has what's called a aerated concrete roof, which for the uninitiated means that actually that roof needs to be replaced, and we're not the only hospital that has this way of putting a roof on a building, and so we're going to need to move all of the facilities in A block out of A block whilst that work is being done. So as a consequence, Garden Suite will be moved temporarily to an alternative space on the Kidderminster site before it returns to the Alps. And so that's the position. Hopefully that answers the question. And Richard, have I missed anything? No?
No, that's covered it. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from anyone in the gallery today, or indeed on YouTube, if someone is watching at the moment? I don't see any other hands. That being the case, I think if we don't have anything, I can draw this to a close. Before I do, Matthew, did you want to make any final comments before we go?
I don't think so, Chair. I think I've said enough, I'm excited about the future, but recognise we've got some challenges ahead to build confidence amongst our patients in the community that we're running a great hospital ship for the people of the county, and that's what I know my leadership and the board are absolutely focused on doing. So look forward to working with everybody on making that happen.
Well said, Matthew. Absolutely. So I'd like to just finish by thanking everyone for their time this afternoon. We really appreciate you coming along for the AGM. I do hope that you will continue to engage with us and come along when you can. And certainly, and Councillor Clayton, in terms of your request to have a look at the ED, I can assure you that we'll make sure an invite comes out to you as soon as we can, because it's certainly, I've seen it when it's a building site, when you have to wear a hard hat and heavy boots and stuff, but it looks very impressive, and I think that the people of Worcestershire will be really impressed when it's finished. So I say yes, you're very welcome to come and have a look in due course. Thank you everyone for your time this afternoon. I hope you have a good rest of the day, and we'll speak again soon. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Thanks.